Phil Harris and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible fortnightly podcast, Dream Big, Move Fast.
A progressive, contemporary conversation on what it takes to be a dynamic thinker, leader, and role model.
Backed with over 2 decades of friendship, trials and tribulations that teach from real-world experience and what it takes to dream big, move fast. I've been thinking about the difference between resume values and the eulogy values. The resume virtues are the ones that you list on your resume, the skills that you bring to the job market, and they contribute to external success. The eulogy values are deeper. They are the virtues that get you talked about at your funeral. They're the ones that exist on the core of your being, whether or not you're kind, brave, honest, or faithful, and what kind of relationships you actually formed. David Brooks. Phil, that's a pretty deep way to start today. What are your thoughts about, the difference here between eulogy values and what we've got in terms of resume values and how that helps to define a character and the type of person you want to become?
I've got to be honest, Josh, I had to read it a couple of times before we came on just to get my head around it. But no, I really like it. I think it's a good reminder, almost like at work. Josh, our work values when we rock up to work, it's all good, but then there's a much deeper side to who we really are as people and what are the bigger issues in life that we're actually going to be remembered for, and what's the impact and the legacy that we're going to have on others. So, I really enjoyed that one.
I think this is a great conversation too. There's you think about titling and egoism and I remember turning up with my dad at the office, and Dad actually had at the back, director, was over his car park.
Sure.
That's where the director parked, and you can kind of see why that's really important in the evolution and growing up a business. And you know how proud he would have been that day that he put that sign up out the back. And now I'm like, man, the directors don't even park out the back.
Did he have personalised number plates as well?
No, he didn't have
agent.
No, it was sold. But that basic idea is to think very differently about what it is that you're doing. But what, it doesn't matter who you are or what level you operate. Like, there is nothing wrong with actually being kind and a great human being and really looking after people, whether or not they've got more advantage or less advantage than you. But actually just doing all of that sort of stuff is a massive part. And I think that it really leads into a great conversation today about what we're going to go and call Management 101. Phil, managing people is a really interesting conversation. And I said to someone the other day, hey, think about it that people are going through life stages, and that's kind of interesting, getting a partner and having kids, and hopefully that goes really well and the kids leaving and all of that sort of stuff. And there's some unfortunate situations that may happen during the course of that. You might have a child that's a little bit sick, touch wood, hopefully not. Or you might have something happen and unfortunately a relationship isn't successful. And then after that, then you've got life events that actually occur. So sometimes there are things that happen that are completely outside of your control, which can really change the course of a life. How important is it for you to have some level of awareness about life events and life stages in your management style when you're working and growing and managing people?
I think it's everything, Josh. From my experience in managing people, you're not when things are going well for people, you're not managing. Mm-hmm. It's almost like you're recognizing and rewarding when things are going in the right space. In terms of situational awareness, whenever I'm having challenges, Josh, in terms of whether that be somebody's performance, whether that be an attitudinal issue, whether it be, whatever that is, generally speaking, Josh, it's got nothing to do with the function of the work that they're actually doing, and it's generally to do with a life phase or life stage of something that's actually occurring outside of the real estate office. So when you start to have a better appreciation and understanding for that person's life situation, I think that's reflects in you becoming a better manager. And I think that comes with time in the seat and experience. And as you get older and you mature and you're more experienced in your own personal life, Josh, and your own challenges and your own flaws and your own issues, I think you become far more maybe understanding, tolerant and appreciative of where other people are at in terms of that management process.
And do you feel that management is more of an art or a science?
I think it's completely a blend of both. I think that great managers, there are really good structures in place, Josh, for a good manager. Almost so one of those structures might be meeting rhythms, as an example. So I would say that that's a concrete scientific approach, which is, okay, I'm going to have a sales management meeting on a Monday morning, and then I might have a one-on-one on a Monday with a new starter, and then Tuesday might be my high performance meetings or whatever it might be, and then there's quarterly reviews and annual reviews for managing people. So you need those structures, so the science to it. But then I'd say the art form is then how you deal with people in the moment. So it becomes a blend of both structure and creativity in managing people.
This is actually kind of an interesting conversation when you have a look at Amazon. I think Jeff Bezos is really classic for saying, hey, you know what, I really love a team that can actually eat a pizza together. So if you start thinking about like 5, 6, 7 people, I'm not sure what size pizza he's getting, but 5 or 6 people sitting around that.
Not with me around the table.
Yeah, is an important part. What have you learned in terms of the management style? Like how you were managing when you first started with just a couple of people, inside of Harris day one versus having to manage now, 300-ish type people. Like what does that look like? Tell us a bit more about management style and what you've learned through that journey.
I think it's multifaceted. It's not only about managing people, it's also about managing the styles. I think there's a very different style, Josh, to managing a salesperson versus managing someone who's in administration versus managing somebody who's in leadership. I think they're all very, very different in the approach. So if we say, what's my thoughts on salespeople? I feel managing salespeople in our organisation doesn't really exist under what people might think is the traditional sales management model. So it's not about, here's your KPIs and here's your, whatever it might be. I feel managing salespeople these days is more about providing resource and platform to assist people. Now, occasionally there are times when you need to step in, but it's less a hierarchical, you must do this, as opposed to how can I help and how can I serve, is how you would manage a salesperson. Whereas administration, I think, becomes far more of a structured approach to managing.
If we go to think a little bit about like impactors, how different was it when you first opened up a second geographical site? Because like when you're all underneath the one roof, I assume that's easier. And when you go to the second geographical site, you start thinking, hey, that's different again because who's running culture there and who's doing that? Was there any lessons that happened that as you started to grow through geographical territory?
I think as you spread, you definitely become far more diluted. Also, what I found in terms of the growth of Harris now is that you have far more subcultures that make up the culture. If you've got 250, 300 bodies across an organisation, when we first started, Josh, there was 5 staff, and I would say that the 5 people all very much like me. We all came in, we all got in early, we made our call 30, 40 calls before midday. Like that was the style. Now Harris is very different to that. So as you expand across different locations, I would say we have different cultures inside those organisations, so the management styles actually vary from office to office.
This is kind of interesting when you start to think, and we'll go on the sales side first up, but on the management side about, what sort of performers are you going to go after? So if your business is going to write $1 million, let's keep it very simple. Are you going to have, 3 people doing $300,000 each? Or are you going to have $1 million writer who's going to have a couple of people underneath them? Phil, what's easier to manage? Having lots of people that are just doing okay, or in a position of an entire team of elite performers?
I've got to be careful what I say. No, I think that my perspective has always been I like to have a blend. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's, I think for the people listening, you need to understand your model as well. And so I think about the Harris model. I think it's very important that we have a select group of very high performers. I think that's very important for the organisation that I want, because those high performers inside an organisation, they provide inspiration and aspiration for the people coming through. So if you think of that model, so in terms of the management piece, I would say the management style for, we might have 10 people at Harris writing really extraordinary numbers. The management style for them is different to somebody who's maybe that middle of the road performer writing, 200, 300, 400K.
But it's really important that you've got some role models, that people can go to look after. So whether or not it's someone like an Arabella Hooper or whether or not it's a Tom Hector, that they have the ability to write a large amount of volume, that they can be very successful in their marketplaces. And there's things that you can learn around how they can go to work with consumers, how they crack markets, what they do for consistency, and how they do it for a couple of decades and some, right? And this is an important conversation to realize that, from a management point of view, the more lower performers you've got, the more management structure you're going to need. And because that's kind of an interesting thing, because new people are very hungry for energy and for effort and for guidance and what to do and how to make all that happen. And this is kind of the interesting thing that we see quite a bit is that it feels to me like a lot of the New Zealand practices tend to have a lot more management style as opposed to what we see here in Australia on that sales management function. What are your thoughts about those things?
Yeah, I very much agree with, in terms of having high performers, that makes up the real fabric of Harris. Like they provide the inspiration, aspiration. That's what people want to strive to. They add so much value. In terms of the style of having a lot more management in New Zealand, also, I think kind of maybe the way we employ people. I know that in New Zealand there is no debit credit system over there. You can have as many people as you possibly want on com only. So I think that creates an environment in itself that's maybe having a lot more lower performers. I might not be saying this right, but it kind of feels like if there's a lot more lower performers, it's going to require more management. Where maybe in Australia, then maybe there's a requirement for a high performer.
Interesting conversation about like ages, profiles, demographics. So if you start thinking about that, there's different management styles too, right? And this is sometimes you're actually helping people with different life events that they're going through and different life stages. And other times too, you're actually just teaching people about maturity and the basics around money and some of the things that go on there. When you start to think about those ages and demographics and the skill sets that are required, is it different now to actually start to think like far out, man, like you know so much in what you've gained in 20 years in the industry. How do you teach all of that and help those people to be highly successful, right?
Yeah, it is. It's very challenging. And I think after 20 odd years, you do realise that, I mean, real estate is so simple, but at the same time, Josh, it's so complex. Like the overall nature for a salesperson to sit down and say, look, you need a prospect list and sell. They're your three dimensions, but there is a lot more to actually unpack. But I think that, one of the key things for management / leadership is just helping people to continue to see the better version of themselves every single day. So how do you just keep moving people like, for you and I, Josh, as much as we've learned over the years, we are still babies in terms of what the availability of what there is to learn. So I think if you can continue just to encourage people to, hey, there are some core fundamentals I want you to stay focused on, but I also want to help you stay focused on the best version of you, of what you are becoming.
This is kind of an interesting thing is that like my greatest management tip I was ever taught was to say, do what other managers have done to you that you've liked and do that to more people, and don't do to others what others have done to you that you didn't like. And I think that like when I just think about that, geez, I really didn't like the way that was delivered or how I was made to feel or what actually happened on day one of starting that organization. They gave me the laptop with someone else's eyelashes already over the keyboard. It's like, never do that again. But what I really liked is I liked when they had a birthday cake when you arrived at the office and say, congratulations, welcome to Harris. Like those things are really important. What are some of Phil's great management tips that you've gained over the years?
Well, I like the analogy where you went. I think you just sit down and you think, hang on, if I was starting at Harris Real Estate today, what are some of the things, if I had a manager that I was kind of, who was overseeing me, what are the sort of things that I'd like to see? Well, I'd like a manager, first and foremost, is about resource. So if I need something, I want a manager who comes back to me and says, oh, what do you need? And I say, well, I'm struggling with this. I want somebody who can actually close the loop. So one of the key things I'm always talking to our sales management team about is, we talk about daily catch up. I say, what's up and where are you stuck? They're like the two questions. You can just walk up to someone.
Good for you. I like it rhyming.
Yeah. What's up? Where you stuck?
Yeah.
And that's the first. Well, hang on, because everybody's different. Everybody's diverse. Somebody says, I've got a problem with the letterbox drop. Somebody says, I've got a problem with staff members. Someone says, I'm trying to recruit, hire, fire, whatever it might be. Okay, here's what's going on in my life and here's where I'm stuck. And then ultimately, if you become a problem solver, if you actually go back and you close loops on a regular basis and you build a reputation as being somebody that identifies what somebody's problems are, and you come back and you become a problem solver and a fixer, that to me is what great management is. And then on top of that, if you're doing a few other basic things, which is, recognizing and encouraging someone when they're doing something well, okay? And then when there are challenging conversations that need to be had, just the basics of doing that in private and continually linking people to being the best version of themselves. Like it's pretty basic stuff.
The interesting conversation that I go and say that, when you're going to go and build those relationships, so your skill as a manager is to really think about, well, what are the things I can put in play? Now, two things that we did in our organization straight up is that we have a broken systems meeting each week. So what's the stuff that's just not working? What are the things that are broken or where things have not been followed through on? And then the second conversation, which I really love, is that we have a decisions channel. We happen to use Slack, and inside of that, if anyone inside the organization is looking at a decision from either me or from Kylie or from someone, then ultimately they just literally put it in that decisions channel and we come back to them by close of business that day. Now, that might actually not be the decision, but it's actually going to give a time frame. So, Phil, we can't make a decision on that. It's going to be Friday or XYZ because of some other contextual awareness. But it's actually made people really appreciate what's actually going on because now there's some clarity that they can actually add some value pretty quickly. If you think about it, one of the good things in terms of the management piece is about like areas of responsibility. And Phil, I love that as a heading. If I just said to you, okay, great, what is Phil Harris's areas of responsibility right now inside of the Harris organization?
As a manager of myself? Or?
Yeah. What's your areas of responsibility?
For me, I really only focus these days on kind of two or three core things. Like one is I'm right at the forefront of vision, so we're on a pretty strong growth journey at the moment, Josh. So one of my core responsibilities, say, here's the destination, the vision of where we want this company to be next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So I'd say that is number one. Number two for me is around innovation. So when I say innovation, I'm not kind of cooking up apps or those sort of things, but I'm reading, I'm hanging out with people like you, I'm attending courses, I'm doing all of those sort of things to try and get my head around where is the industry going, what are the things we need to be doing, what do we need to be focusing on, and then I would say thirdly, behind that, Josh, would be key people. So I'm in the business of either retaining key people, making sure we've got the best people in the industry, staying inside Harris. And then second to that is I'm out there externally looking for the industry's best people to join Harris. So I'm totally crystal clear. They're my three responsibilities.
It's kind of amazing the number of times I'll go in an organization and I'll say, oh, guys, what do you want some help on? And, what can we do some training on today? And what would be the best value out of our training session? And I hear people say structure. And I'm like, clarity of roles. Does that kind of concern you that people would actually have those sorts of things coming up when you start to say, well, hang on a second, just write down the heading areas of responsibility and tell me what you're actually responsible for in the workflow? Because surely that's the most important thing to get right from the beginning. And that as the organization grows or as your team grows, to have that conversation and say, okay, great, where are areas of responsibility shifting? And how does that relate to the core projects to really make sure we go to get growth? What are your thoughts about making sure that you just say, hey, great, if you walked into your management team today and you said, hey guys, what are your areas of responsibility? Is there crisscross, or are they in a position that they're very, very clear about what they do, when they do it, and why that's important for the organization's growth over time?
Yeah, it's probably something, it sounds like you were talking about our company.
It wasn't, but
yeah. But no, I would say that, if I talk particularly about our sales management team, with about 5 people in that sales management team, they're all very clear on, they've all got a few core responsibilities in terms of what those requirements are. And then there is a little bit of fluidity that actually goes with that. But yeah, I am staggered with people that, number one, Josh, don't have clarity over what the role is. And then secondly, what is the standard to actually adhere to? So if you can actually get clear from a management perspective that I'm going to look after these 3 or 4 channels and these are the standards I'm going to uphold, then I think it becomes a whole lot easier.
It's kind of interesting. Imagine walking into Macca's and you're there and you're on the fry station and they're like, oh, how you going cooking the fries? Oh, I just need a bit more structure and I need a bit more clarity on the role. Man, you're on the fry station. Literally follow the systems and then you're going to go and get an incredible result. Now, if we're going to finish off with our principle for today, growth should be a very specific, explicit, strategic decision. What are your thoughts about that as just a little comment about, the growth cycle that people go through? Because sometimes people just grow for growth's sake and it should be a very clear decision that you're making, because obviously there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of challenges and lots of capital costs associated with doing growth, right?
Well, I think growing for growth's sake, or just kind of growing via osmosis rather than growing via direct intensity, if that makes sense. So I'd say, once again, Harris, where we are today versus where we are 10 years, we are very, very deliberate and intent on what are the things that we are trying to do. And that was one of the concepts you introduced me to going back many years ago, Josh, was the Vern Harnish scaling up methodology. And maybe you started talking about Everest missions 10 years ago or whatever, and that's become core terminology inside our organisation now. But just that simple exercise of going, here we are, we're just about to finish up the financial year, right? Now, where are we going to be in 3 years' time? And then actually back charting that. That's been a really great process for us.
I think that was kind of an interesting thing, is also talking about knowing the growth parts. And I think that there was a study done at one point and it was and this obviously varies, business to business, but at 300 property managements, you're probably doing well. And then the next scale point might be 720. And then the next one after that might be 1100. But in between you nearly die because the cost of putting on that extra property manager and that extra management layer means that profitability completely drops. And so you've got to actually understand where is the ultimate profitability point. And that's why we've seen a lot of businesses, I think, struggle when they first start up and we're just going to organically grow PM from day one. And before you know it, they're paying your property manager 70, 80, 100 grand, whatever it might be. But the property management revenue that's coming in is $20,000.
Doesn't cover it. Yep.
And so all of a sudden you're having to, dip into sales and go and do that. And that's great while sales is going well. But then if sales comes off because there's a legislative change or something goes on in terms of winter market conditions, then all of a sudden the business is in a cash flow crisis and then the manager's all over the place and they're not really thinking about what it is that they're doing. What I'm saying to you is that, your absolute number one skill without a doubt is to actually say, okay, great, well, make sure that you've got enough cash aside and make sure that you know what you're going to go through and be in a position that you understand why it's going to be important to have someone who's absolutely nailing it on that sales environment if you're going to go through those cash burn situations. And that's actually okay. Getting to the next scaling point is what we're all here to do, but actually understand that there are going to be costs associated with it. And I think that for a lot of people, they kind of just think that business is really easy. You know what? Business is actually fundamentally tough. But when you understand that it's fundamentally tough, it becomes infinitely easier because you expect the challenges that will come with every single one of those stages of growth. Feeling good and ready for more? Thanks for joining us
On Dream Big,
Move Fast.